Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, the show that takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible.
Hello, good morning everyone, and thank you for tuning into today's show, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Crystal, and on today's show, I am really excited for this one, guys. This is about how to manifest the life that you have always dreamed about. How do we do this? Are there workbooks? Are there videos? What are the sciences behind manifestation? How does it really work? And is it instant? Or does it take a lot to have those laws of attraction and success stories bring you something that you've always dreamed about and always wanted to know? And today we're going to explore all those areas. I have some great audio for you guys on a couple really well-renowned people that have done TED Talks, have created their own workbooks, built well-lived and joyful lives, and I cannot wait to get into this. So let's go. So what is manifestation? Well, the definition of manifestation is the proof of the reality of something, often a sight or a smell. An example of manifestation is the smile on a woman's face when her husband appears, showing how much she loves him. A public demonstration, it could also be political in nature. You can even tell as many people as you want about your manifestation. Talking about your manifestation to others won't necessarily block or prevent your desires from developing. But talking about it can strengthen your faith and your willingness to share with other people, which can in turn often help you manifest things faster. And what are some necessarily general tips that we can look at, right? Well, some things that people might want to manifest are their dream home. They might want to manifest a better job, or a nicer car, or maybe they don't even have a vehicle at all and they walk everywhere. You know, maybe you want a better relationship. Maybe you want a little more vacation time, maybe a dream outfit, right? These are all things that you can look at to help you manifest in your life. And some of the first tips we're going to look at would be to one, of course, you want to be clear on what you want. Whether that's writing it down or creating a board for you to look at, that's on your wall, and every morning you look at these things and you realize that these are the goals that you're trying to achieve. These are the things that you want to practice for a better self-worth, for more inner joy and contentedness, okay? You want to ask the universe for these things. That's step 2. You want to proclaim it. You want to put it out there, whether it's verbally, whether it's in your mind, whether you write it down, whether you sing it out loud, whatever you're comfortable with. But ask the universe for these things and make it known. You want to ask the universe for what you want once a day and make your request clearer and clearer, right? So you want to work toward those goals. So if I wanted, say, my dream job, well, I could put how much money I want to make a year. Or I want to describe what my dream job would look like. I would want to put out the process and the guidelines for the things that I'm trying to acquire from that job. What I think my boss would be like, what my day-to-day activities would look like, right? All these little things, all these little details that we look at are things that can help you become clearer and clearer and clearer about your goals and what it is that you're really trying to obtain, right? You want to trust the process. And this is, for me, like probably the hardest step because, there's a lot of the time where you overthink and you overwork and you're constantly like, I have to do this, I have to do that. Like if I don't just do something every single day, nothing's ever going to get done. I'm never going to get to these goals. And instead of just trusting the process and still working and being responsible about those things, it becomes very difficult to set those things aside. So putting the trust in the work that you're doing, putting the trust in the process that even if it is a longer period of time for you to do these goals and make this work, eventually it will come to fruition. Step 5 is to receive and acknowledge what you do get. So by that, you want to understand that the universe is always giving you help. And it can be easy to miss the signs, especially when they're unexpected. And when you start to acknowledge and receive signs from the universe will give you more of what you want. So a good way to get started would be to write down the evidence in a journal at the end of the day. Okay, and we've talked about journaling before as well. You want to make sure to include anything that happened to you during the day that moved you a little bit closer to your goals. Maybe you, like as an example, have a dream car and today you were able to walk by a dealership and take a look at it, or speak to a sales rep about the different functions of the vehicle or some upcoming sales that might be happening for that particular model. You want to make sure that you're trying to get out of debt, and let's say another example, and your credit card company called to sort out a more appropriate payment plan. And that's evidence right there. You can also be an inspirational quote. It can also be an inspirational quote speaking to you on Facebook. Step 6 is to keep your vibrations high. Now, what does that mean? Keep your vibrations high. Well, we're talking about laws of attraction. You attract what you're sending out. If you're all wishy-washy and you're not sure, and then that's going to come back to you. You have to raise your vibrations. They're like little radio signals, and you're continuously sending out this to the universe. You have to tune into your signal to a vibration worthy of receiving, which means staying positive, staying thankful, being grateful at the end of the day, or even in the morning. And all you really have to do to raise your vibration levels is feel joy. Whatever sparks that for you. It could be cuddling with your dog, or coloring in a book, or writing in your journal, or cooking a meal. You have to feel that joy. And once you feel that, appreciate it. Stay positive of it. Try to hold on to it and be thankful for it. By spending 10 to 15 minutes a day at least, which is not a lot of time. We all know we have that time when we use the restroom, when we lay in bed in the morning, or when we watch TV. We have 10 or 15 minutes to do something that makes you feel good. It could be watching a YouTube video. It could be meditating. You want to ensure that these feel-good things that you do will keep your vibrations higher. And remember, when you're in a crappy mood, it means that you're going to be rewarded with crap, right? No foul language intended. But staying positive is the easiest way to be certain good things are coming. Step 7 is to clear your resistance. And if you haven't yet manifested what you want, it's likely that you're resisting what the universe has to offer. Doubts and procrastination, frustration, pain, anxiety, fears, regrets, resentments are all forms of resistance, and they're totally normal. And when you notice this conflict coming up within you, We do talk about acknowledgement a lot, but again, you have to acknowledge it. You can't just brush it aside and say, oh, well, this is okay for a minute, but I'm not really going to think about it. You have to remind yourself to breathe and relax. It might sound something like, okay, I'm frustrated again. I'm resisting again. I get it. All I have to do now is breathe, relax, and let it come. And if you're having a hard time letting go of problems, find someone to help you through it. Manifesting your desires is 100% possible, but to do so, you must use all the steps, which again, step 1 is get clear on what you want. Step 2 is ask the universe for it. Step 3 is taking action. 4 is trusting in the process. Step 5 is acknowledging what is being sent to you along the way. 6 is increasing your vibrations. And lastly, clear all the resistance from that. And if this isn't crazy enough, that's 7 steps, right? There's other ones that have just 4 steps. So for instance, step 1 is letting go of resistance, and we keep talking about it, and we keep talking about it, and it's just so important to manifest your dreams. And you should feel like you are able to achieve greater awareness over your thoughts. When you're trying to resist something, you're fueling the problem. Again, setting those goals and learning to attract deliberately. You have to set intention. Speak about it. Dream about it. Talk about it. Use affirmations. Use visualizations. And step 4 is definitely acting as if you're already living your dreams. And that law of attraction works to match all of the positivity that you're emitting and providing you with more of the same. By acting as if you already have it, you're creating this reality and the world just forms around it. And it's important to try and avoid inner conflict at all costs. Your task has to be, about feeling good and living as if you already have those things. And coming up real quick, we're going to have a couple really great TED Talks for designing your life and the science and success of happiness. But going back to what we were talking about with manifestation, there's also some fantastic books on that. Manifesting Your Desires is one, which is by Esther Hicks. There's Super Attractor, Methods for Manifesting a Life Beyond Your Wildest Dreams by Gabrielle Bernstein. The Secret by Rhonda Byrne, which became a movie. I don't know if any of you ever heard of it. Wishes Fulfilled, which is by Dr. Wayne Dyer. As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. These are all just a small example of books or things that you can look at to help you go through this process if you're not sure where to start. And what's really interesting is that there's a couple other different methods as well. There's one called the 369 manifestation method. There's the 555 method, the 333 method, and I don't think that it's supposed to really mean anything at this point, but for instance, say, the 369 method. In the morning, shortly after you wake up, write down that manifestation 3 times. In the afternoon, write it down 6 more times. And finally at night, write it down 9 more times. And that's it. So how simple is that? So again, all you have to do is just write it down a little bit. The same thing with the 333 method. It's basically an abbreviated version, which is similar to the 555 method. And you basically pick a specific affirmation and you write it 33 times a day for 3 days, which doesn't take as much time as the 555 method, which is 55 times over 5 days, but it can be just as effective. And it might be something that you want to try. I don't know if you guys have ever done anything like this. Please let me know. I would love to hear from you. We're on Twitter and Facebook. You can also write out a script, which is where it's a technique where you describe in writing your life as if you've already had what you wish to manifest. And it It tricks your mind into thinking that what you currently wish for has already happened. And what can we learn from that statement, right? If we're going to write a script of what our life could be like and that we're already living it by tricking our mind, doesn't that mean that we're essentially holding ourselves back from what we could really have or want, from what we deserve to have in our life or what could bring us joy? And of course, we want to make sure that what we're trying to manifest is really the key thing that will help us be happier. It doesn't necessarily have to be money or a big house. It could be a better relationship. It could be anything at all, really. But being true to yourself and writing down these key demographics for your own personal life and well-being can really help you take steps into figuring out where you want to be at. How long do you want this to take? Do you want a better education? Do you want to move across the country? Do you want to learn a new language? These are all things you can manifest for yourself. And taking the steps and being honest about what you really want is and can be a good factor in that. And coming up, we're going to get into a few great TED Talks and a few workbook discussions as well. So stay tuned. See you guys soon.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Guys, thank you so much for coming back. Now, I have a TED Talk that I want to share with you guys. It's on the science and success of happiness by Anthony Ives. It is going to take up a good portion of this podcast, but I feel like this TED Talk is incredibly important toward this segment, and I hope you guys get as much out of it as I did. So, here we go.
Sounds familiar to some of you or maybe many of you. When I was growing up, I was taught that the following would lead to success and happiness in life. Get good grades, get into a good college, have a good career, you'll be successful, you'll be happy. So that's what I did. Worked really hard in school, got those good grades for the sake of the good grades. Tried to get into a really good college, and I was fortunate to get into MIT, a very prestigious university, which led me to eventually get a job in a very good company, paying a good salary. So I did all the things I was supposed to do, right? I should have success. I should have happiness. It wasn't quite the way it played out. I found myself actually in my mid-20s not that happy. Not that happy with my job, not that happy with life. I found myself questioning a lot of what I'd been told, what I'd learned. I found people around me with degrees from less prestigious universities passing me by. I found myself not maybe pursuing the best opportunities for myself, not taking risks I should have taken. And I found myself in my mid-20s suffering from an episode of depression. So naturally I asked the question, why? How did I end up here? I did what I thought you were supposed to do. Reflecting on this years later, I've come to learn a lot of things informed by the field of psychology. The first thing I think is really important, groundbreaking work in the field of psychology is work from Carol Dweck and others at Stanford and other universities on the importance of developing a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset. What these researchers have taught us is that fixed mindsets, like I had growing up, are where you think about your skills, your qualities, your attributes as being inflexible, not going to change. And these are the things that determine success in life. The research has shown that people who have fixed mindsets, like I did at the time, tend to actually shy away from seeking out interesting opportunities for growth and development. They tend to fear failure and therefore not pursue the things that could be rewarding and meaningful to them. And most importantly, they tend to underperform later in life, even when controlling for things like intelligence and other factors that we believe lead to success. Other people, on the other hand, operate by what's called a growth mindset. They believe that our talents, our qualities, our abilities are malleable, that with persistence, dedicated effort, we can grow, we can improve, we can change. And in fact, over time, these people tend to pursue more challenging opportunities, find ways to grow and develop. These people tend to embrace failure and thus give themselves opportunities to make their lives and other lives better. And finally, these people actually outperform the fixed mindset people, that it's more your mindset than even things like intelligence, things like IQ, that will determine your success and happiness in life. Sadly, I didn't know this growing up. This research wasn't around. I didn't know about these theories. But one of the things we've learned these days is that not only are these two different ways of thinking about yourself and thinking about the world, but that you can change. There is evidence to show you can shift from having a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. When we think about college and our futures, again, a topic that's very important for many of you, all of you here today, I think we have to be careful and think about, are we looking at college and our lives from the point of view of a fixed mindset or a growth mindset? And what does that actually mean? What is the impact of that? Do you think the college you go to will you determine your life? Or do you think that you, your effort, your work, the opportunities you choose to pursue are going to determine what happens in your life? I've also spent some time thinking more about how did I go wrong making the decisions I did early on in my life. Again, we're very fortunate these days. We've got more knowledge of what many people call the science of decision-making. Over the last few decades, there's been a lot of work helping us understand we think we're rational. We think we make good decisions based on good information, but that's not often the case. What we usually do is follow what are called heuristics, shortcuts, simple rules, efficient ways to make quick judgments and decisions. These are often informed by limited information, maybe one piece of key information you heard somewhere, as opposed to taking a thorough look at a situation. Heuristics can be very helpful. If you go to McDonald's and eat a burger, go to another McDonald's, eat a burger, and you want to get a third McDonald's burger, you can be pretty sure that any McDonald's you go to anywhere else in the world, the burger is going to taste the same. You don't have to ask them how they cooked it. You don't have to ask them what the ingredients are. You can be pretty sure, making a snap judgment, that third burger is going to be the same. Similarly, you see red coil on a stove. You can be pretty sure, either from your past experience or someone else's experience, that that stove is going to be hot and you shouldn't touch it. You don't need to test it out. You don't need to ask somebody if they just painted it red. There's a good chance that is going to burn you and you don't touch it. So heuristics that we use on a daily basis are quite helpful to us. But they can also be not so helpful. Research shows that tall people, for example, oftentimes get hired over shorter people, or oftentimes get promoted over shorter people, even when the job has nothing to do with your height. So companies, organizations, losing perhaps the ability to have the most talented people because of a snap judgment, an error in judgment we often make. Wine, for example. People often say when they taste a wine that it tasted really good, but later they find out that was heavily influenced by the packaging or the price of the wine bottle. In fact, some really interesting research experiments were done where they took vodka, same exact vodka, put it in one bottle that looked expensive with a high price, the exact same vodka in a different bottle looked less expensive at a lower price. People tasted the same two vodkas and said, wow, this one is so much better than this one. The exact same vodka. We don't always make good decisions about things, especially when it comes to our lives, because of these heuristics that govern how we operate in the world. I would argue that most of us, when we think about heuristics about college career success, think about it in the following way. Which college you attend will determine your success and opportunities you'll have in your career, and your career is going to determine your happiness. But I think that's kind of a sad and incorrect way to look at the world, because if you follow this thinking, what does this actually mean? Only a few people can actually be successful? Only a few people can actually be happy? That's not how the world actually works. Here's some examples of just how much your college and the name brand with it may or may not matter like you think. Joe Biden, outgoing Vice President of the United States. Maybe you didn't know this. His undergraduate institution was University of Delaware. Condoleezza Rice, former Secretary of State, attended University of Denver for undergraduate studies. Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, went to Auburn University. Angela Ahrens, former CEO of Burberry, Ball State University. Sergey Brin, co-founder of Google, went to the University of Maryland as an undergraduate. Ann Sweeney, president of Disney ABC, former president of Disney ABC, College of New Rochelle. And my favorite one on this list, Lester Holt, NBC News anchor and one of the moderators of a presidential debate this past year. Cal State Sacramento, he didn't even graduate. He left school without even getting a college degree. My guess is if you look at this list, you'd say these people have done pretty well for themselves. By all reports, they're successful and they're happy. They didn't go to the institutions that many of us here think we have to go to have success and happiness. Let's bring it closer to home. The highest honor a teacher can receive at TS is to be recognized as a Teacher of the Year. It means you're held in the highest regard by students, faculty, and administrators. And here are some of the recent Teacher of the Year awards given out since I've been here. Dr. Nathan Smith, University of Tennessee. Mr. Matt Fagan, Eckerd College. Mr. Jami Franklin, Santa Clara University. If any of you have had the privilege of being in their classroom, you will know they're as good as it gets when it comes to teaching. And again, they didn't go to the kinds of universities that people here tend to get overly excited and brag about when someone gets admitted to. What does that say? Here's what employers think about this question and how this landscape is shifting as well. Recently, Deloitte, a leading consulting and accounting firm, global firm, announced in the UK they're going to stop looking at what school or college you attended because they believe, one, that doesn't allow them to find the best people out there, and two, it doesn't allow them to build the most diverse workforce. They don't even ask anymore. They don't even want to know which school or college you attended. Google, the head of Google HR, CNN, New York Times, he gives interviews to anyone who will listen saying, college you attended matters less and less these days. In fact, with their strong data analytics within Google, they've done correlation studies to look at and find that people with the highest GPAs and the best test scores are not necessarily the top performing employees at Google. In fact, taking this even further, in some departments, up to 14% of the people don't even have a college degree at all. What you know how to do, and what kind of person you are matters more and more and will continue to matter more and more as we develop better ways of evaluating and recruiting people out there in the world. So, if the old ways you used to think about success and happiness maybe don't apply as much anymore, what should we follow? What should we do? Well, fortunately, there's researchers out there, particularly at the University of Pennsylvania, working on this very question. And the latest, greatest research is a model called PERMA, which says, if you want to increase your well-being, if you want to flourish in life, here's the 5 things you should do. First, look for experiencing positive emotions. And this is something you can do on a daily basis. No matter how small, even usually the smallest ones make the biggest difference. You can find on a daily basis ways to experience positive emotions. Second, engagement. Find things to involve yourself in that draw you, that pull you in, that make you feel productive, make you feel alive, regardless of the glamour of the job or not. 3, positive relationships, and especially opportunities where you give more than you get. 4, find the meaning in what you're doing. What's the purpose? What's the contribution you're making? And 5, finally, accomplishment. Opportunities for you to do things where you see accomplishment, where you grow, where you improve. Notice that none of these have to do with which university you attend or don't attend. None of these have to do with the glamour of your job or the pay of your job. These are things that successful, happy people, according to the research, do regardless of the degree on their wall, regardless of their job title. So here's what I've learned. I regret chasing after good grades in high school just for the sake of those grades. I missed opportunities for learning and growth. I regret going after a college just because of its name, not thinking about whether it would be the right place for me and if I would use it well to explore myself. I regret thinking that those good grades in the college were going to give me the job that would give me happiness and success, that all these things would be given to me. I regret developing that fixed mindset. And most of all, I realize now I regret developing a self-concept and a sense of self-worth that was too tied into my grades, my college, job, money, any of these kinds of things. Fortunately, I've had the opportunity to learn and improve and grow, and I hope you all will as well. So here's my advice to you. 1, remember, we're not always good at making decisions. We live more by heuristics than we do by better decision-making methods. So recognize that in yourselves when you take in information. 2, your college will not give you success and happiness. In fact, that fixed mindset will probably hinder you later in life. It's what you make out of any experience you have that matters. 3, we have better research now on what does actually lead to success and happiness. We need to adopt these new approaches and get rid of the old way of thinking about this kind of stuff. Can only a few people be successful and happy, or can everyone be? What do you need to do to be successful and happy? How are you going to answer that question for yourself? You're all very fortunate. You get to choose what to believe. Thank you very much.
All right. Now, I hope you guys got a lot out of that, just like I did. Now, I know we're talking about manifestation, and that particular video kind of discussed a little bit more on the job side of it, a little bit more on the school side of it. But I think that the other message that they're really trying to get across, and what more importantly relates to this particular podcast episode, is that it's not just about the things that you already have done or the things that you're currently striving for. It's more than that. You shouldn't let these other things get in your way. You shouldn't have to say to yourself, I can't do that. It'll never happen for me. Why is that person always seemingly getting everything that I want or needed? Or why are they more successful than me? What makes it so different, right? And I think that's the crux of it for this particular section. It is about having a good job. It's not just about the places that you went to for schooling or the grades that you got. Sometimes that does have an important factor, but not necessarily every time. And it really is about the person. And if you can take anything from this podcast, it's that there's always time for change. There's always time for growth. There's always time for you to be successful in your life and give yourself the things that you want and what you deserve. And now coming up, we're going to get into more of like the workbook side of it and how to kind of design a little bit more in depth of your particular life. But with the TED Talk that we just listened to, it's great to keep an open mind with these things. It's great to always change course, and it can be scary, it can be different, and sometimes or oftentimes you will find yourself going in a direction that you've never intended. For instance, I worked in heavy equipment operating in construction, and then I did a lot of other labor work like welding, but I'm also certified in interior design and have learned how to do computer coding, none of which I ever thought I would do in my life, but I'm glad that I made those changes, and I'm glad that I sacrificed my time and desire for something that I think would bring me success.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
So right now I have one other TED Talk for you guys. We're going to get that into that in our last segment, but fairly soon, I take that back. But I also want to read to you a couple of success stories that are based off the laws of attraction. This was found on the lawofattractioncenter.com. So if you guys have any curiosities or want to look up anything else, there are a ton of manifestation stories of people that have been successful with this type of thing and who have really changed their life around. My computer had a virus and I didn't know what to do. I couldn't ever even run antivirus software, so I relaxed and asked for guidance. It was interesting that although I'm very aware of the law of attraction teachings, that when it came to something which I use so much not working, I didn't feel very hopeful about a quick solution. I started trying to figure out how to repair it and found on the internet posts of other people who had a similar problem, and it all looked very complicated to resolve. I decided to switch the computer off and to go away and meditate. After meditating, I thought about how this occurrence made me feel, and I realized it was a feeling of being under attack. I thought about what the opposite emotion was and came up with the feeling loved and looked after. I began to do a focusing process on the feeling of being loved and looked after, and after completing this, I returned to my computer and was guided to do a search on how to resolve the problem. I found a YouTube clip with clear instructions, and I followed them, and my computer was perfect again. I love how anything can be changed when our thoughts and feelings change. I often use meditation and some of the other techniques I learned in your workshop before I go shopping and use the difference, and the difference is incredible. Rather than rooting through rails of unwanted clothes, I find that I'm led to very specific sections which have the perfect item for me and always in my size and often discounted. I wanted a certain car, which was on my vision board and had been for nearly a year. Just a week after your workshop, as part of being headhunted randomly with a new job offer, which was a very good job, I was offered to choose from a selection of very high standard cars for my company car. And one of the choices was the car from my vision board, even allowing me to get the exact same color and finish as the picture of the car on my board. And I look forward to driving it to the next event. And it's funny because we've talked about these things, we've touched on them, we're trying to guide people to bring about their eternal happiness, their eternal life, what it looks like for them. And you don't have to compare yourself to anyone else. You don't have to have the same thing as your neighbor or your family or your spouse. You can manifest whatever happiness looks like for you. And the stories that they have, the environments that they spread, it seems like it's not going to work. It seems like it would take too much time, like it might be, too much to handle. But the fact of the matter is, if you don't try, how are you ever going to know? And some of these stories that we've touched on, they really do show that. For instance, another one says, I'd lost one of my favorite earrings about 3 months ago. It had been so long that I assumed it had gone in the washing machine or bin. One night after attending one of the groups, I got home and was feeling particularly good. I suddenly thought of the earring and mentally asked where it was. Immediately, I saw that it was in a pocket of my trousers. I thought that was strange, as I would have checked all of the pockets, but the guidance was so clear. Checking the trousers and a few jackets and outfits, nothing. I looked under the bed and then realized I was searching again, as it didn't feel effortless. I closed my eyes again and felt that it was in a pocket. And in that instant, I looked at the bottom of a drawer and went straight for a pair of shorts. But before I checked the pocket, I smiled, imagining the success story that I would be submitting. And putting my hand in my pocket of the shorts, there it was. And it's some small, effortless things like this that can provide that. But being clear and feeling like it was effortless does take time. You guiding your own laws of attraction and manifesting these things and asking for the universe for these signs and signals, accepting that, guiding yourself to a higher vibration helps to clear these things up, whether you're missing an earring or you're trying to get your dream car, etc. And I hope you guys are getting a clearer understanding of how this works. Now, the next TED Talk will run into the next segment. It's 5 Steps to Designing the Life You Want by Bill Burnett. And our closing will be talking about different ways to journal that and different other methods that they have for planning it out and what that can look like as well. So without further ado, the next TED Talk.
Hello, everyone. I'm here to help you design your life. We're going to use the technique of design thinking. Design thinking is something we've been working on at the D School and in the School of Engineering for over 50 years. And it's an innovation methodology, works on products, works on services. But I think the most interesting design problem is your life. So that's what we're going to talk about. I want to just make sure everybody knows, sees my buddy Dave Evans' face. Dave and I are the co-authors of the book, and he's the guy who helped me co-found the Life Design Lab at Stanford. So what do we do in the Life Design Lab? Well, we teach the class that helps you figure out what you want to be when you grow up. Now, I'm going to give you the first reframe. Designers love reframes. How many of you hope you never grow up and lose that childlike curiosity that drives everything you do? Raise your hand. Right. Who wants to grow up? I mean, we've been talking about curiosity in almost every one of these talks. And so I'd like to reframe this as we teach the class that helps you figure out what you want to grow into next as this life of yours, this amazing design of yours unfolds. So design thinking is what we teach, and it's a set of mindsets. It's how designers think. You know, we've been taught probably in the university to be sort of skeptical realists, rationalists, but that's not very useful as a mindset when you're trying to do something new, something no one's ever done before. So we say you start with curiosity and you lean into what you're curious about. We say you reframe problems because most of the time we find people are working on the wrong problems. They have a wonderful solution to something that doesn't work anyway. So what's the point of working on the wrong thing? We say radical collaboration because the answer's out in the world with other people. That's where your experience of your life will be. We want to be mindful of our process. There are times in the design process when you want lots of ideas. And there are times in the design process where you really want to converge and test some things, prototype some things. So you want to be good at that. And the other is bias to action. Now, you know, I'll say that we think no plan for your life will survive first contact with reality. Reality has a tendency to throw little things at us that we weren't expecting, sometimes good things, sometimes bad. So we say, just have a bias to action. Try stuff. Why? Why did we start this class? Well, I've been in office hours for a long, long time with my students. I've been teaching here for a while. Dave as well. He was teaching over at that community college in Berkeley for a while. And what we notice is, I'm sorry. It's a Stanford TEDx. What we notice is people get stuck. People really get stuck, and then they don't know what to do, and they don't seem to have any tools for getting unstuck. And designers get stuck all the time. I mean, I signed up to be a designer, which means I'm going to work on something that I've never done every day. And I get stuck and unstuck and stuck and unstuck all the time. But we also noticed as we went out and we talked to folks, not just our students, but people in mid-career and encore careers, that people have a bunch of beliefs which psychologists label dysfunctional beliefs, things they believe that are true that actually aren't true. And it holds them back. I'll give you 3. First one is, what's your passion? Tell me your passion, and then I'll tell you what you need to do. Now, if you actually have one of these things, these passions, you knew at 2 you wanted to be a doctor, you knew at 7 you wanted to be a clown at Cirque du Soleil, and now you are one, that's awesome. But, you know, we're sort of research-based here at Stanford, so we went over to the Center for the Study of Adolescence, which, by the way, now goes up to 27. And met with Bill Damon, who's one of our colleagues. He's a fantastic guy. He studied this question, and it turns out less than 20% of the people have any one singular identifiable passion in their lives. So we hate a methodology which says, okay, come to the front of the line. Do you have a passion? Oh, you don't? Oh, I'm sorry. Go to the back when you have one. Come on back and we'll help you with that. It's terrible. 8 out of 10 people say, I have lots of things I'm interested in. So this is not an organizing principle for your search or your design. The second one is, well, you should know by now, right? Don't you know where you're going? If you don't know, you're late. Now, what are you late for exactly? I'm not quite sure. But people have, you know, there's a meta-narrative in the culture. When I was growing up, 25, you were supposed to have, you know, maybe have a relationship, maybe have gotten married, starting to get the family together. When I talk to my students, my millennial students, they'll say, oh, that's got to be like 30 or something, because they can't imagine anything past like 22. But 30 is a long way out. But we know that nowadays people are forming their lives much more fluidly. They are staying in a lot more dynamic motion between about 22 and 35. And so this notion that you're late is really kind of, it's not only it's like, well, you should have figured this out by now. Dave and I don't should on anybody. in the book or in the class. We don't believe in should. We just think, all right, you are wherever you are. Let's start from where you are. You're not late for anything. But the one we really don't like is, are you being the best possible version of you? I mean, because you're not settling, are you, for something that's less than the best? Because this is Stanford. Obviously, we all want to be the best. Well, this implies that, one, there's a singular best, two, that it's a linear thing, and life is anything but linear. And three, there's this old, it kind of comes from this business notion. There's an old business saying, good is the enemy of better, better is the enemy of best. And you always want to do your best in business. But if there isn't one singular best, then our reframe is, the unattainable best is the enemy of all the available betters. Because there are many, many versions of you that you could play out, all of which would result in a well-designed life. So I'm going to give you 3 ideas from design thinking and the way, or 5 ideas, excuse me. It says 5, doesn't it? Yeah, 5 ideas from design thinking. The things that people have written back to us who've read the book or taken the class and said, hey, these were the most useful, these were the most doable, they were the most helpful. And we're human-centered designers, so we want to be helpful. The first one is this notion of connecting the dots. The number one reason people take our class, and we here read the book, is they say, you know, I want my life to be meaningful. I want it to be purposeful. I want it to add up to something. So we looked in the positive psychology literature and in the design literature, and it turns out that there's who you are, there's what you believe, and there's what you do in the world. And if you can make a connection between these 3 things, if you can make that a coherent story, you will experience your life as meaningful. The increase in meaning making comes from connecting the dots. So we do 2 things. We ask people, write a work view. What's your theory of work? Not the job you want, but why do you work? What's it for? What's work in service of? Once you have that, 250 words, then this one's a little harder to get short. What's the meaning of life? What's the big picture? Why are you here? What is your faith or your view of the world? When you can connect your life view and your work view together in a coherent way, you start to experience your life as meaningful. That's the idea number 1. Idea number 2, people get stuck, and and you got to be careful because we can reframe almost anything, but there's a class of problems that people get stuck on that are really, really bad problems. We call them gravity problems. Essentially, there's something you cannot change. Now, not you, but I know you have a friend, and you've been having coffee with this friend for a while, and they're stuck. They don't like their boss. They don't like their partner. They don't like their job. There's something they don't like. But nothing's happening, right? Nothing's happening with them. If Dave were here, he'd say, look, you can't solve a problem you're not willing to have. You can't solve a problem you're not willing to have. So if you've got a gravity problem, and you're simply not willing to work on it, then it's just a circumstance in your life. And the only thing we know to do with gravity problems is to accept. In the design thinking chart, you start with empathy, then you redefine the problem, then you come up with lots of ideas, and you prototype and test things. But that only works if it's a problem you're willing to work on. The first thing to do is accept. And once you've accepted, this is a gravity problem, I can't change it. You know, this is a company and the company is a family-run company, and the name of the founder is on the door, and if you're not in the family, you can't be the president. You're right.
All right, so guys, real quick break. Thank you for sticking around like this. We're going to finish off this TED Talk in the next segment of today's show. I hope you're getting as much out of this, and then we will talk about it and bring some other details to manifesting our dream life and creating our own happiness. Stay tuned.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
right, and we are back with our last segment of today's show. We're going to finish off the TED Talk that we were listening to. If you're just joining us, it is on the Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett, and we've been talking about some amazing things, how we can feel stuck and how we need to look at our life and realign some of the things that we're trying to work at. What is the meaning of our life, and what are we supposed to do in it, and what are the things that we can and cannot change? You know, those are all very important questions to ask, and sometimes we need to go a little deeper. So let's get started and continue and find out what we find out.
You're right. You can't. So now you have to decide, what do you want to do? Is that a circumstance that you can reframe and work in, or do you need to do something else? So be really careful about gravity problems because they're pernicious and they really get in the way. But back to this idea of multiples. I do a little thought experiment with my students. And I say, you know, the physicists up at SLAC have kind of demonstrated that this multiverse thing might be real. You've heard of this, right? That there are multiple parallel universes, one right next to each other. And I said, you know, we'll do a thought experiment. Let's say you could live in all the multiverses simultaneously. And not only that, but you would know about your life in each one of these instances. So you could go back and be the ballerina, and the scientist, and the CPA, and whatever else you wanted to be. You could have all these lives in parallel. When I ask them, how many lives are you? How many lives would you want? I get answers from 3 to 10,000. But, you know, we've sort of done the average. It's about 7.5. Most people think they have about 7.5 really good lives that they could live. And here's the deal. You only get one. But it turns out it's not what you don't choose. It's what you choose in life that makes you happy. Nevertheless, we reframe this and we say, great, there's more lives than one in you. So let's go on an odyssey and let's really figure out those lives. And we ask people to do some design. In the ideate bubble, it's about having lots of ideas. So we say, let's have some ideas. We're going to ideate your future, but you can't ideate just one. You have to ideate 3. Now, there's some research from the School of Education that says if you start with 3 ideas and you brainstorm from there, you get a wider range of ideas. The ideas are more generative, and they lead to better solutions to the problem rather than just starting with 1 and then brainstorming forward. So we always do 3s. There's something magical about 3s. We have people do 3 lives, and it's transformational. We give them this little rubric. 1, the thing you're doing. The thing you're doing right now, whatever your career is, just do it. And you're going to do it for 5 years, and it's going to come out great. So, I mean, in design, we're sort of values neutral, except for one thing. We never design anything to make it worse, right? I have been on some teams that made some pretty bad products, but we weren't trying to. We were trying to make it better. So, thing 1, your life, make it better. And also put in the bucket list stuff. You want to go to Paris, want to go to the Galapagos before the guy with the ice thing, before it's all underwater and we can't see it anymore. So that's plan 1. Your life now goes great. Plan 2. I'm really sorry to tell you, but the robots and the AI stuff, that job doesn't exist anymore. The robots are doing it. We don't need you to do that anymore. Now what are you going to do? So what do you do if the thing that you've got goes away? And everybody's got a side hustle or something that they can do to make that work. And 3 is, what's your wild card plan? What would you do if you didn't have to worry about money? You got enough. You're not fabulously wealthy, but you got enough. And what would you do if you knew no one would laugh? My students come into my office hours a lot of times, and they'll say something like, well, what I really want to do is this, but I can just hear people saying, you didn't go to Stanford to do that, did you? Right? Because somehow or other, if you went to Stanford, you have to do some of the amazing things that the past speakers have been doing. But what would you do if you had enough money and you didn't care what people thought? Anything from, I'm going to go study butterflies to I want to be a bartender, in Belize. What would you do? And people have those 3 plans. Now, what happens when they do this is, 1, they realize, oh my gosh, I could actually have imagined 3 completely parallel lives. They're all pretty interesting. 2, they rarely go become a bartender, in Belize. But a lot of times, the things that come up on the other plans were things that they left behind somehow. In the busyness of life, they forgot about those things. And so they bring them back and they put them in plan one. They make their lives even better. Sometimes they do pivot. But mostly they just use this as a method of ideating all the possible wonderful ways they could have a life. Now, you could start executing that. But in our model, the thing you do after you have ideas is you build a prototype. We have met people who've quit their job and suddenly done something else. It hardly ever works. You kind of have to sneak up on it because in our model, we want to set the bar really low, try stuff, have some success, do it again. So when we say prototype in our language, what we mean is a way to ask an interesting question. What would it be like if I tried this? A way to expose the assumptions. Is this even the thing I want? Or is that just something I remember I wanted when I was 20? I got to go out in the world and do this, so I'm going to get others involved in prototyping my life. And I'm going to sneak up on the future because I don't know if this is exactly what I want. The two kinds of life design prototypes, one we call a prototype conversation. William Gibson, the science fiction writer, has a famous quote, "The future is already here, it's just unevenly distributed." So there is someone who's a bartender in Ibiza. He has been doing it for years. I could go meet him and have a conversation, he or she. Somebody else is doing something else I'm interested in. All these people are out there. They're living in my future today. They're doing what I want to do today. And if I have a conversation with them, I just ask for their story, and everybody will tell you their story. If you buy them a cup of coffee, they'll tell you the story. And if I hear something in the story that rings in me, we have this thing we call narrative resonance. When I hear a story that's kind of like my story, something happens. And I can identify that as a potential way of moving forward. The other one is a prototype experience. I was working with, Dave and I were working with a woman, sort of mid-career in her 40s, and very successful tech executive, but wanted to move from money-making to meaning-making, wanted to do something more meaningful. Thinking of going back to school, getting an MA in education, working with kids. But she's like, I don't know, I'm 45, going back to school, it's not going to work. And then I heard about these millennials. They're kind of mean, and they don't like old people. What am I going to do, Bill? I said, well, you just have to go try this, Turns out, so we sent her to a seminar class and to a large lecture hall class. By the way, you just put on a T-shirt that says Stanford, you walk into a class, nobody knows. She wasn't registered, but everybody, she went to the classes, and she came back and she said, you know what, it was fantastic. I walked into the lecture hall, I sat down, my body was on fire. It was interesting. I'm so interested in the way the lecture was going. And then I met these millennials that turn out they're pretty interesting people. I've set up 3 prototype conversations, and they think I'm interesting because I'm coming back to school and I'm 45. So she had a felt experience, because we are more than just our brains. She had a felt experience that this might work for her. So those are 2 ways you could prototype your way forward. The last idea. You want to make a good decision well. So many people make choices and they're not happy with their choices because they don't really know, how do they know what they know, right? It's a hard thing, particularly nowadays when we have so many choices. So we have a process. Again, it comes from the positive psychology guys. Gather and create options. Once you get good at design, you're really good at coming up with lots of options. You got to narrow those down to the working list that you can work with. Then you make the choice, you make a good choice. And then, of course, you agonize that you did the wrong thing. All my students have what is called FOMO, fear of missing out. What if I didn't pick the right thing? I had someone came into my office and said, I'm going to declare 3 majors and 2 minors. And I said, did you plan on being here for a few years? It's not going to happen, right? So we don't say that. We say, you want to let go and move on. And all these have some psychological basis in them. Let me tell you about it. So once you get good at gathering and creating ideas, you also want to make sure you leave room for the lucky ideas, the serendipitous ideas. And this is a guy named Tony Hsieh. He was the CEO at Zappos. He sold it to Amazon. But he had before you became an employee at Zappos, you had to take a test, and the test was, are you lucky? 1, 2, or 3, I'm not very lucky, I'm not sure why. 7, 8, 9, 10, I'm very lucky, great things happen to me all the time, I'm not sure why. He wouldn't hire anybody that was not lucky. I think is probably illegal, but it was based on a piece of research where psychologists did the same thing, rate yourself from lucky to unlucky, and then they had people read New York Times, the front section of New York Times, 30 pages, lots of articles, and the the graduate student said, please count the number of either headlines or photographs, depending on the test. And if you get the right, when you get the whole thing read and you count the number of photographs, just tell the person at the end, and if you got the right number, you get $100. Of course, you all know that when a graduate student tells you what the experiment is, that's not the experiment. So inside this thing that looked like a New York Times, 30 pages, front page, inside all the stories were little pieces of text that said, if you read this, the experiment's over, collect an extra $150. People who rated themselves as unlucky, by and large, got the right answer, 36 headlines, whatever it was, got the $100. People who read themselves as lucky, 7, 8, 9, or 10, 80% of the time noticed the text and got the extra $150. It's not about being lucky. It's about paying attention to what you're doing and keeping your peripheral vision open. Because it's in your peripheral vision that those interesting opportunities show up, right? That you were not expecting. So you want to get good at being lucky. Narrowing down. This is quite simple. If you have too many choices, you go into what psychologists call choice overload, and then you have essentially no choices. Here's the experiment. This was done at Stanford. You walk into a grocery store, and there's a nice lady with she's got a table, and on the table she has 6 jams. And you come over, try the jams, have a sample, buy some jam. 6 jams, about 30 of people who will go by pick a jam or stop and test something, and about a third of those actually buy a jam. Okay, that's the baseline. Next week, you walk in, 24 jams. Jalapeno, strawberry, banana, whatever, all sorts of jams. Well, guess what happens? Twice as many people stop. Look at all these jams. It's so interesting. 3% of the people buy it. When you have too many choices, you have no choice. What do you do when you have too many choices? Just cross off a bunch of choices. The psychologists tell us we can't handle more than 5 to 7. I'd say 5. If you've got a bunch of choices, cross them all off. Just pick the 5 and then make your decision there. Oh my God, what if I pick the wrong ones? What if I cross off the wrong ones? Right? Well, you won't, because it's the pizza or Chinese food thing. You're at the office, and everybody says, hey, let's go out to lunch today. That sounds great. What do you want to do? Pizza or Chinese food? I don't care. Okay, everybody gets together, and halfway, in the elevator on the way down, someone says, let's get Chinese food. Then you go, no, I want pizza. You won't make the decision you won't decide how you feel about the decision until the decision's made. That's a piece of research that's been done again and again and again. So just cross them off. If you cross off the wrong one, you'll have a feeling somewhere in your stomach that you did the wrong thing. Choosing. This is about that feeling in your stomach. You cannot choose well if you choose only from your rational mind. This is Dan Goleman, who wrote the book on emotional intelligence. He does a lot of research on this, a lot of brain science. There's a part of your brain, way down in the base brain, the basal ganglia, that summarizes emotional decisions for you. I did something, got good emotional response from that. Good, check. Did something, bad emotional response to that. It summarizes all of the emotions that you have felt and how your decisions were valenced, positive or negative in emotion. The problem with that part of your brain is it's so early in the brain, it doesn't talk to the part of your brain that talks. It has no connection to the prefrontal cortex or anything else. It's only connected to your GI tract and your limbic system. So it gives you information through felt sensations, a gut feeling. Without that, you can't make good decisions. And then the letting go and moving on. This was the hardest part for me, but this is also the work of Dan Gilbert, who is a distinguished scientist at Harvard, despite the fact that he's doing insurance commercials now. And he's been studying decision-making and how do you make yourself happy. So you walk in, another psychology experiment. The postdoc has got 5 Monet prints, 5 pictures from Monet, and you rank them from best to least. I like this one the most. I like this one the least. Number 1 and number 5. Thank you very much. The experiment's over. Oh, by the way, as you're walking out, the grad student says, I kind of screwed up and I bought too many of number 2 and 3. So if you want to take one home, you can just have it. 2 conditions. In one case, take it home and have it, but don't bring it back because I'm kind of embarrassed, and just keep it. You can't exchange it. Second condition, I got lots of these. If you don't like the one you picked, you can swap it back and pick another one. And of course, everybody picks number 2. It's a little better than number 3. Bring people back in a week later, say, re-rank the stimuli. Which one do you like now? The people who are allowed to change their mind don't like their painting. They don't like the print. They don't like the other one anymore. They don't like any of them anymore. In fact, they don't like the whole process, and they have destroyed their opportunity to be happy. The people who were told, you pick it, it's yours, you can't return it, love their print. They typically rank it as number one. And think the rest of them suck. If you make decisions reversible, your chance of being happy goes down like 60 or 70%. So let go and move on. Make the decision irreversible. And by the way, as a designer, that's no problem because you're really good at generating options. That's what you're great at ideation. You're really good at prototyping to get data in the world to see if that world is going to be the world you want to live in. So you have no fear of missing out. It's just a process, mindful of process. Collect, reduce, decide, move on. That's how you make yourself happy. So the 5 ideas, connecting the dots to find meaning through work and life views. Stay away from gravity problems because I can't fix those and neither can you. Reframe those to something that is workable. Do 3 plans, never 1. Always do 3 of everything. 3 ideations for any of the problems you're working on to make sure that you've covered not just the ideas that you had when you started, but all the other ideas that are possible. Prototype everything in your life before you jump in and try it. And choose well. There's no point in making a good choice poorly. Choose well, and you will find that things in your life are much easier. And you can do this. We know you can because thousands of students have done it. 2 PhD studies have been done in the class that demonstrate higher self-efficacy, lower dysfunctional beliefs. It's a fascinating process to watch people who don't think of themselves as creative go through this class and walk out saying, you know what? I'm a pretty creative person. What David Kelly calls creative confidence. So we know you can do it. Thank you very much. It's simple. Get curious. Talk to people and try stuff. And you will do.
Now, how amazing was that podcast? Or TED Talk, I should say. I learned so much from this, and I hope you guys did too. You know, don't be afraid to try new things. Step outside of yourself. Really ask yourself deeper questions. Don't overthink it. Make a list of things that you want. Work on manifesting, and more importantly, believe in yourself. Belief in yourself is going to be the hugest thing in propelling your life and manifesting the life and desires that you dream, and more importantly, that you deserve. And I want to thank you guys so much for joining me today. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask you to please subscribe to the show. It helps us out. Please write a nice review on Facebook or Twitter, Instagram. I would love to hear back from you guys, and I can't wait to bring you next week's episode. And always, let us be happy.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find the show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows. From the GSMC Podcast Network, from sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast.